The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast. Now, here's your host, Tony D'Angelo.
And a very good afternoon to you wherever you may be. I am Tony D'Angelo, and this is Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast, here on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And man, have I got a show for you. Hollywood producer, director, and all-around good guy James B. Harris, one half of the team of Harris and Stanley Kubrick, will be here with me this afternoon. We're going to talk about Mr. Harris's career, talking about Making the Killing, Paths of Glory, Lolita, Some Call It Loving, Eyes Wide Shut, which Stanley Kubrick did later on, which was an inspiration from Some Call It Loving, and a couple of later films, Fast Walking and Cop, involving James Woods. So this is really going to be a great show. I'd like all you guys to sit back, relax, and we're going to have a good time here. We got Jim Croce coming up. He's working at the Car Wash Blues. Well, I got working in the studio blues, but no blues for me here. We'll be right back at you right after this.
Commando is here to help you. He's your one-man army. No enemy can destroy him. He fights off tanks, hurls missiles one after another. Even a squadron of planes can't stop him. Robot Commando fires his secret weapon. He takes orders from no one except you.
Wow!
Ideal's Robot Commando is battery operated to obey your command. Adjust the control, speak into the microphone.
Left! Fire!
Ideal's Robot Commando is here to help you. Look for your Robot Commando. He's looking for you.
And if he is, you don't have to worry. Kids, I had a Robot Commando. It could not have flattened a grape. To all of our fans along the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, I am pleased to be joined this afternoon by producer-director James B. Harris. You may know Mr. Harris as one half of the team of Harris and Kubrick. Films like The Killing, Paths of Glory, Lolita, Some Call It Loving, Fast Walking, and Cop. And my friend Jim, whom I met this week, and is just very honored to do it, is a whole lot more than that. So in calling in from the desert in Rancho Mirage, California, Jim, how are you this afternoon?
I'm real good, Tony. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
And it certainly is. And I was, we had met at the interview we were doing for our mutual friend Michael Dante, and we chatted for a while. I didn't know you were a musician at first, or you still are.
Yeah, I still am. I hadn't pursued it as a career, although I did go to Juilliard for a short period of time as a percussion major. But I really felt that at that time that to be honest with myself, that I really wasn't really good enough to pursue it as a career. I just didn't feel that it would be worthwhile to be an itinerant musician. And I guess the awful truth is I just wasn't that good. Although I still pursue it as a hobby, so to speak, and once in a while still work some gigs and sort of get my musical ambitions fulfilled that way. But once I got into the motion picture industry, I felt that was where I belonged, and that's where I thought I could contribute most.
Now, who are some of your favorite musicians over the course of time?
favorite musician?
Yeah.
Well, I had to do a progress through the kind of music that I responded to. It started, I suppose, with Dixieland way back in the 30s, and progressed into the big band era, the swing era, and then once I heard the jazz, the bebop that was created by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and people like that, I felt that was really what I was I responded mostly to, and still do to this day. It's the kind of classic jazz that never gets dated, never gets old, and seems always to provoke a response on my part. So I would say when you ask about favorite musicians, there are so many that
it's almost uncountable. I know.
I know, but you look at the ones that have been front runners, that have set examples to be followed, and people like Dizzy and Bird, Charlie Parker, and Thelonious Monk, and Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and there's Oscar Peterson, and of course I still love big band music. When you think of the Woody Herman bands and Stan Kenton and Buddy Rich, and it all seems to work for me, and I never get tired listening to it.
Well, that's great, and it's great to know you're still out there performing. Now, if I understand correctly, you had sort of an elliptical path into the movie business. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I was always interested in photography, and I started after I left Juilliard. I was still only 17, and went to work, and my father was able to place me in his insurance brokerage office. I could be an office boy there, and then my dad started making investments in little film distribution companies, and it seemed to me that it would be more interesting. Why couldn't I be an office boy in those companies, insurance brokerage outfit? And so that's when I got exposed to film. And growing up at that point, growing up in New York City, I had the advantage of being located near the Museum of Modern Art, which I was able to spend as much time there as I could, studying in their film library, and they had their screening program, and I learned an awful lot just reading and watching, and so having a film background in distribution, I was able to get into the signal corps army when I was drafted during the Korean War, and I really was fortunate enough to be placed in a unit where we were trained as combat photographers, and in my unit was a fellow named Alex Singer, who had gone to school with Stanley Kubrick, and so through Alex Singer I met Stanley Kubrick, and once I got out of the army and I sort of ran into Kubrick again, we decided to become partners, and I would be a producer and he would be a director, which that to me was really the change in my life. I mean, that was the game changer right there.
Yeah, for certain.
Once you're fortunate enough to be Kubrick's partner and also became his best friend, you just can't help but try to emulate him, because there were signs of what I thought at that time was a budding genius. I mean, somebody so young. I mean, we were only in our 20s at that time, and he had already done several short subjects and 2 feature films. The first feature film he did was called Fear and Desire. The second one was called Killer's Kid, and that's the film that he showed me when we met again after I got out of the army. And to me, that it seemed like that somebody of his age, being so so young, was capable of doing all of the elements of making a feature film. He directed it, he edited it, he did the photography. It's just amazing that he had, at such an early age, all these talents. And I thought what I could bring to him would be the financial support that he was lacking. In other words, I had the wherewithal to acquire material, rather than have to make it up.
Sure.
It's a big difference than finding a real good book that you could acquire the film rights to, which I did when we had agreed to become partners. And I that very day after I left work, I was still in distribution of films and television at that time. I went to the Scribner's bookstore in Fifth Avenue and came across a book about the robbery of a racetrack. It was called Clean Break by an author named Lionel White. And I thought this would make a terrific movie. And I bought the book and read it and gave it to Stanley the next day. And he agreed, and that became our first film together, which really launched our careers. The Killing is still today known as one of the great, I guess you call it a film noir.
Film noir, yeah. And that's how could I put it? That was really kind of the sort of the signature stamp for you guys. And you worked there with Sterling Hayden. And how? I've always liked watching Sterling Hayden. How was he to work with?
He was wonderful to work with. We had a budget and a schedule that had to be adhered to. And we only had 24 days that we could afford to have to do that, and so you need actors that really cooperate and
sure.
Don't cause problems with asking a lot of questions and trying to create things away from the screenplay. He was totally cooperative, and if he wasn't, would Stanley have used him again in Dr. Strangelove?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
He was terrific, and but don't forget it was a great accumulation of character actors. Sterling, of course, was the leader of the gang that he formed to rob the racetrack. But Stanley was so knowledgeable about all of these supporting actors like Timothy Carey that we used, and Elisha Cook Jr. and J.C. Flippin and Ted DeCorsia and Sawyer. I got his first name.
Yeah, you really did have that, whatever you want to call it, sort of that really rough edge. I'm going to call it like a New York edge to it.
Yeah, well, it was, what we call hard-boiled.
Yeah.
Don't forget, like Marie Windsor was.
Yeah, the Queen of the Bees, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Stanley also didn't believe that it was necessary to use opticals. By opticals, I mean fades and dissolves.
Mm-hmm.
He really believed that you could just straight cut when the scene was over. You could straight cut to the next scene, and the audience is smart enough to realize that what's going on in the story. You don't have to dissolve into it to show a passing of time, or whatever the fade out, fade in was calculated to be. That a straight cut from one scene to another, the audience could accept that. Whereas in the past, they're so used to being fade ins and fade outs and dissolves and wipes and all of those opticals that really are not necessary. You notice today, very little of that is.
Yeah, for certain.
Yeah.
And now you guys really were kind of a couple of New York guys that have crossed the country at this point. Must have seemed kind of odd for you.
Well, it did. It did in that we would have preferred to have made the film in the New York area, but we couldn't get any racetracks to cooperate. So we found that we could get cooperation from a racetrack in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and so we picked up and moved out to Hollywood to do the film. After we completed the film, we of course brought it back to New York and delivered it to United Artists, and set about pursuing a career, which we felt would be better served back in Hollywood. That's where we felt most of the action was. So after we're going back to 1956 at this time, Stanley and I moved out to California, and we then developed the next project, which was Paths of Glory.
You know, that must have been a heck of a jump for you guys to go right from a work that was maybe more modest to its underpinnings to bang, now here you are with a big budget and Kirk Douglas and, you know, all the other feature players that you had. Can you tell us about what that was like?
Yeah, well, after The Killing, Stanley and I were both felt strongly about wanting to do something that's dealing with war. We wanted to do a war film, and Stanley remembered that as I think a 14-year-old, he had read a book called Paths of Glory by Humphrey Cobb, and I was in New York at that time, probably promoting The Killing, and he said, I think I found the next picture we should do. You won't be able to find it in a bookstore, but why don't you go to the New York Public Library, which I did. Mm-hmm. And I was able to find the book and read it, and I agreed with him that would make a terrific movie. And so then I acquired the film rights, and we were in business. We then had to develop the script, and we used Calder Willingham and Jim Thompson, and we developed the script, and we were able to get Kirk Douglas to star and play the leading role, which of course his attachment to the project enabled us to get it financed through United Artists. And without Kirk Douglas, we'd still be looking to get that picture made. But at that time, and even so, we still had a budget constraints. I mean, that picture was done for less than $1 million. That picture was done for $900,000, which I suppose I don't know whether you would say that that's a big budget for those days, but for us, I know that Stanley and I were very we weren't able to take anything out for ourselves. Kirk was getting $200,000.
Wow.
That didn't leave very much for the rest of the cast, but we were able to put together a terrific cast.
But he was Kirk, yeah. And what kind of a guy was he like to work with?
Well, Kirk was an established, absolute, confirmed movie star. And we were just sort of, I guess, beginners
mm-hmm.
in relationship to his career. He had done so many films, and this to me was just my second film. So it was like learning how to behave in the presence of a star. Because, when you do movies with actors, or particularly with movie stars, it's very difficult to win any arguments, because if a star doesn't want to do something, or he has a position that he's taking, and you have an opposite position, you're not going to win the argument, because first of all, to straighten it out is going to take time, and time is money, and you can't afford to be sitting around and not shooting. Secondly, you can't replace the star, because that would mean everything that had been photographed or shot up to that time would have to be redone, whereas the producer or the director could get fired and be replaced the very next day, and nothing would have to be reshot. So it's very difficult to win arguments with stars. Now, I'm not saying that Kirk Douglas was argumentative, but you just had to respect. Like when you ask how was it working with a star, you just have to respect
the star's position.
This is an underlying sort of acknowledgement that you have that you're walking on eggshells all the time. But thank goodness Kirk was so into the project and believed in it so that he and Kubrick really, got through it quite successfully.
Yeah, it's just that in the back of my brain, I've got The Bad and the Beautiful playing. I guess your experience was not quite like that.
No. Well, The Bad and the Beautiful, Kirk was a producer.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a very nice guy as that character in The Bad and Beautiful. You remember he sort of threw Barry Sullivan under the bus when they were partners, just like Kubrick and I were partners in that film. And when he had an opportunity to make a film, he threw Barry Sullivan, who was his direct partner, because the studio would finance the picture with him as a director. So, when I saw that picture, it sort of hit home with me that I wasn't that kind of a producer, because when Stanley and I shook hands and said we're going to be partners, I was going to live or die with Kubrick, because I believed in him, and nobody knew who he was, actually. In fact, when we sent the script of The Killing out to Sterling Higgs' agent, the agent wanted to know who Kubrick was. He said, "You're talking about Stanley Kramer or Stanley Kubrick?"
Yes.
And I said, "No, this is Stanley Kubrick." And he said, "Well, who's that?" It probably would have been very easy for me to get another director that was been more established, but I felt at that time that I wasn't about to do that.
No, your loyalty served you well.
You're right, because first of all, it's not in my character to go back on what I really promised. And secondly, I really believed that Kubrick would be probably the best director to do the project, because he did help write the screenplay, and I mean, he's so close to it and understood, how it would be done. I wasn't about to take an easy way out and say, well, it'd be easy to put this picture together if I got a more established.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, fortunately, I was proven right. Look at his body of work from that point on.
Oh, it's magnificent.
You can't ask that question today. Who is Stanley Kubrick? I mean, the whole world knows who he is at this point, or was, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's for certain. Now, you almost worked with Brando on a project and it didn't come out. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, we had the situation with a lot of these big movie stars, because after we had done Paths of Glory, that really, impressed a lot of the people in Hollywood. They were sort of half impressed after The Killing. They saw Paths of Glory. They said, these two kids know what they're doing, and so Marlon was one of a lot of actors that contacted us and said that he'd like to make movies with us. And so we had lots of meetings, and we were never able to come to any agreement on what to do. I mean, the subjects that Marlon wanted to do did not interest Stanley or myself, and the things we were pitching at Marlon, he didn't respond to. And what happened was that he eventually said, look, he had a commitment to do a Western at Paramount, and he would like Stanley to direct that Western, and after that's done, then we can get back to figuring out what we can all do together. In other words, I was relegated at that time to look for future projects for Marlon and ourselves, while Stanley helped him get through this Western, which turned out to be One-Eyed Jacks, if you remember that one.
Yes.
And Stanley, we loaned Stanley out to Marlon's company, which is going to be a Paramount picture, and they didn't get along. Marlon was just too difficult to work for. I wasn't really involved in it, but Stanley and I had never worked for anybody. The pictures that we had done, we did totally independently, and we were our own bosses. But in this particular situation, Marlon, called all the shots, and his sort of peculiar way of working just didn't fit with Stanley's, and so eventually Stanley walked away from that. And in the meantime, I had found Lolita.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And I decided that I showed it to Stanley, and he agreed that would be our next picture. But as after I acquired the film rights to Nabokov's book, Kirk Douglas came back on the scene and asked if he could borrow Stanley for Spartacus, because he had shot 3 days with Anthony Mann and was dissatisfied, and thought that he'd like to replace him with Kubrick. And so we felt this is important for our career, really, because if we could get Stanley to direct Spartacus, which had people like not only Kirk, but had Peter Ustinov and Laurence Olivier and Charles Lawton, 3 incredibly fantastic actors and all directors as well. This could really once and for all establish Kubrick as a real first-rate director. And so we made loaned Stanley out to Kirk's company, and once again Stanley was confronted with having a boss, because it was Kirk's picture.
Right.
But he got through it somehow. I mean, it wasn't Stanley's most favorable or favorite way of working, but he did make a very good epic movie.
Well, when you think of Kirk Douglas, the next word after Douglas, at least in my head, is Spartacus.
Yeah. Well, that's Kirk's project. I mean, he got the Howard Fast book and got Dalton Trumbo to write the screenplay, and then Stanley came on the scene. But there were certain things that Stanley had insisted on, that there had to be a big battle scene, which was not in the Dalton Trumbo script.
Right.
And so Stanley convinced them that they could go to Spain and at a very low cost get an awful lot of extras and do a proper battle scene, which you picture, any kind of a epic like that had to have a battle scene.
Sure.
Wouldn't be right. He also got Gene Simmons into the film.
Well, classic
was
beauty.
not in it at the time, and so Stanley made a major contribution to that project, and I thought did a hell of a job in bringing giving Kirk what he was really looking for, and although there was sort of a conflict between the two, still I'm sure Kirk was happy that he had Stanley for that film.
I'm certainly sure of that as well, considering what it did for Kirk in his career. Now, talking about Lolita, what was the driving force behind that? And I wanted to talk to you about Sue Lyon, who at that time was so young. How did she come into the project?
Through the way any casting process would be. She was one of many who had been brought in by an agent to audition for the part. The thing that was really strange was that I had always thought when I think about Lolita, to me that sort of had like a Spanish or a Hispanic sound, and I always pictured a dark-haired girl playing that part. So when Sue came in for an interview as a blonde, Stanley and I, we interviewed her and let it go at that. And several days later, Stanley came in to work. We were at that time out at Universal. Stanley was doing Spartacus, so we were billeted at Universal. And Stanley came in to our bungalow one morning and said that the night before he had seen this girl, Sue Lyon, on a Loretta Young television show.
Uh-huh.
And he reminded me that we had interviewed her and let it go. And he said, we've got to bring her back. She's terrific. Because he actually saw her on TV. I guess she had a small part or something. And we did bring her back. And we had her read with an actor. And then we actually shot a screen test with James Mason. And she was terrific. And at that time, she was not yet 14. I mean, she turned 14 in July
Unbelievable.
of 1960. And so when we did the film, actually, later on, she was just, we started shooting in the fall of 1960. So she had just turned 14 the previous July. So, but she fulfilled the kind of an actress and type that we felt we had to have. We had to have someone that was not, childlike. You remember, I mean, if you want to use an example, like Patty McCormick was in The Bad Seed, would you remember that?
Yes.
You would then get into pedophilia. You would then get into real dangerous territory. And we felt we had to do this as a bizarre love story, and we had to cast somebody who did not look like a child. And we also chose to eliminate any predisposition on the part of James Mason or Humbert of previous relationships or pursuits of any little girls, as it was in the book. So we were making this like a bizarre love story between
an older person.
Yeah, I know. What I'm thinking of, what I was about to say, was that Stan and I always wanted to do this as a bizarre love story. And we felt that the best love stories in history have always been the inability of the lovers to get together. And the difference...
Interesting.
Like Romeo and Juliet.
Sure.
You have caste differences. You have religious differences. You have...
racial differences, yeah.
But you might even have... ethnic differences, black and white and so forth, that sort of kept the lovers apart, and they weren't able to fulfill the relationship. And we felt that we could explore the one thing that hasn't been done would be the difficulty of lovers to get together on an age basis. And so, but we just made this a single love affair, so that when he comes across this girl, that he has this obsession for her, not for just little girls his whole life. And I think we were successful in doing that. We did play it as a bizarre love story.
Now, where did you film Lolita?
We filmed Lolita in England. In England.
That's interesting, because it has that Americana feel to it.
Well, it's an American story. It takes place in America.
Yeah.
But since we had James Mason and we had Peter Sellers, we could qualify for the EDI plan, which gives you a subsidy to contribute towards the budget of the picture. And we did qualify, so we made the picture in England. Just as I did the Bedford incident that way, because when I did the Bedford as a director, Sidney Poitier has a dual passport and would qualify as the subject of the UK. Mm-hmm. And so we could qualify as an ED plan picture, which really helps in the financing. So that's why we did Lolita in England. But we imitated America. We built all the sets to look like American sets, and we did a certain amount of second unit in the States, for the traveling in the cars and things like that. But all of the scenes were shot in England.
Now, in the Bedford incident, you're working with Richard Widmark, and to me at least, probably one of the most historically underrated leading people that you were ever going to run into, and that must have been a great experience.
It was. Working with Kubrick on the 3 films that we did, and even the development of Dr. Strangelove, I couldn't help but get this sort of desire to direct, because when you see Kubrick in action, it looks easy because all the good guys really make it look easy.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Like Joe DiMaggio would always make all of these fantastic cats.
Yeah, anybody could do it, right?
like they were routine. The ordinary ball player would have to make a spectacular catch. DiMaggio would make the same catch look easy, and that's what really fooled me is watching Kubrick work. I felt, gee, I can do this. It just seems like everything, it just turns out so great, and so I had this desire, and Kubrick with his blessings, I decided that I wanted to go off on my own and start making my own movies. And The Bedford Incident was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never directed before, but I was fortunate enough to have Richard Widmark, who was an established star, very much interested in the subject matter of The Bedford Incident. And when we got together and decided that we would get James Poe to write the screenplay, if you remember, James Poe wrote a screenplay for Lilies of the Field, which...
Oh, I love Lilies of the Field, yes.
Yeah, so Sidney Poitier was the star of Lilies of the Field. And when Poe completed the screenplay on the Bedford Incident, he asked me if I would I think about using Sidney as the journalist in the story. And although the journalist was written as a white person in the story, we decided that if Sidney would be interested, it didn't really matter that there was no racial aspect to the story, and that anybody, it doesn't matter if you're black or white or whatever, you're a human being, you can play a journalist. And so we called Sidney because Poe, and Poe knew him, of course, from Lilies of the Field, and Poe said, and he introduced me over the phone to Poitier, because I was in California, Poitier was in New York, and Poitier seemed interested. So I said that I would get him a script. And so I called Kubrick and asked him, because I had sent a script to Stanley to get his opinion. And I asked Stanley if he would run the script over to Poitier. So he did that, of course. And Poitier called me back after he read it and said he wants to do it. So I was really so lucky to have these two. Before we even started, and
boy, it's great
to get Marty Balsam and Wally Cox and Eric Portman and James MacArthur,
well, you're playing with an all-star team. It's wonderful.
Yeah, never having directed a film before, I had these incredible actors, and when you asked me about what it was like with Widmark, I mean, he was like a mother hen to me. I mean, he was sort of making sure I never got in any trouble, and everybody follows the star of the film. So he led the way for me and helped me get through this thing, and it was sort of a learning on the job. I got stronger and stronger as a director as the picture progressed in the filming. So by the time I was finished with the film, I felt that I really knew what I was doing at this point. But I must say that when you have a cast like that, all you have to do is make sure you just keep everything from getting out of hand, and you're dealing mostly in dynamics, whether they should be a little stronger, a little weaker,
right?
Whatever.
You're filling out the lineup card. It's well.
You don't have to teach them how to act. They all know what the story's about. You don't have to go through the whole Stanislavski business of knowing what the scene is about, and do they know their lines, and everybody is totally prepared. There was no monkey business on it, and it was just for a first film as a director. It was really, I was fortunate enough to have.
Now that's interesting. Yeah, and it's here you are, and it's like, I've got this, I know how to do it, and then there's a number of years between that and your next picture.
Yeah, that's because I think I started to believe my own reviews, and I started to think I was better than I was. I had been offered lots of projects, being young and having produced with Kubrick, and then having done a film that got such good reviews and everything. I look back on it now and say that I've made a lot of mistakes in not wanting to do certain pictures that I was offered, and I was wrong, and I would have had a bigger body of work, but I was holding out to do exactly what I wanted to do.
I understand.
And a lot of the projects where I would have to go to work to direct or for another producer or so. My biggest mistake, I suppose, is when we were doing the Bedford incident. Well, Sidney and I had been offered the book called In the Heat of the Night, and Sidney wanted to do that with me as our next film, and I felt that I said, if we're going to do a film, let's do something about civil rights. Let's do something that has some real social significance. And, I was spoiled after the Bedford incident, being about the thermonuclear,
right,
and Pairs of Glory, a big anti-war film, and having developed Dr. Strangelove with Stanley. I just thought that I told Sidney Poitier, I said, it's just another detective story. There's more wrong about it. I mean, Norman Jewison went on to do it, and he did a terrific job. So I spent a lot of time chasing projects that I wanted to develop myself that really weren't.
Well, you were true to your art. You were true with what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and so I eventually wound up doing a very personal film called Some Call It Loving, which
yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, because as a kid I was like this huge Carol White fan, and I guess she never really got to where she was supposed to go. At least so I thought.
Right. I came across her. I can't remember all the details, but she was perfect for the part of Scarlett in this film, and it's a very personal film. Even very polarizing. It got terrific reviews at the Cannes Film Festival, and it got terrific reviews when it opened in Paris. And just the opposite in America. When it opened in New York, it got the worst reviews you could possibly get. The picture just withdrew it, because it was too expensive to have it distributed and paid for advertising, and you knew that the critics really hated it. So I was confused by that, really, that it should have been so well received in Europe, and particularly in France, and been such negative response in the United States. So, except there was, in certain areas, like there was a critic, who picked the 10 best for the Village Voice, that's a newspaper.
Yes.
And it was on that 10 best list of the year. So, it's really strange that a picture, of all the hundreds of pictures that are made, and it's picked as one of the 10 best of the year, as opposed to these terrible reviews that it got by the New York Times and the Telegram and the Post and the News and the Mirror and all of that. It was really strange. So I've always felt that the pictures probably probably going to be relegated as a cult film, and it's you're either going to love it or hate it, and so I just but that explains the gap, because doing the Bedford incident in 64 and 65, and I didn't get started on some call it loving until 72.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a 5-6 year gap in chasing projects and developing screenplays that never got made, and but it's a learning process, I suppose, and I went on to do fast walking after
Yeah,
that.
I was going to ask you about that too, because I've always been a big James Woods fan, and to me, another guy whom I always thought never got the recognition he deserved.
Well, he did actually. I mean, his body of work is pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah. I just kind of put him up there, higher than even what he's done, which is remarkable.
Yeah, well, he's I gave him his first in Fast Walking. It was the first time he played sort of like a romantic lead.
Yes.
He usually was either in a group, or like in the Killing Onion Field and things like that. But he wasn't nominated for an Academy Award when I think it was Oliver Reed that did. The South American country, Salvador. It was called Salvador, and he got nominated. The year that Paul Newman won for The Color of Money.
Ah.
But he's done terrific parts. Like Once Upon a Time in America. You remember that film with De Niro?
Yes, I do.
And he played a terrific part in Casino, and he was and I used him. We became partners and sort of really good friends, and we did a picture called Cop together, where we really got great reviews for that.
Well, I mean, you got me there because ever since she did Cinderella, like Leslie Ann Warren, you just, you freeze me to the chair. She's so lovely.
Yeah, well, she was in Cop, and with Charlie Durning. I was always lucky to have great cast.
Yeah, sure did.
Kubrick educated me on that. He said that casting is 80% at least of a movie, maybe more. You live and die with who you've selected, because if you got the wrong people, the picture's just not going to work or be as good as you had hoped. But you get the right people, man, they really give it to you, and they bring into sharp focus the things that you dreamt of having. And when you get actors like James Wood, it just that's why I did 2 films with Jimmy, and we've always remained real close friends. We still have a company together, and we still have the rights to the character that was created by James Ellroy for Cop, because it was based on a James Ellroy book. And so the character of Lloyd Hopkins, which he played in Cop, is something that I think we're going to develop as a TV series, because he was one of those cops that pushed the envelope a little bit further than it should be pushed, and doesn't want to have anything to do with political correctness. And Woods is, he's a terrific partner to have. I mean, I think Woods should be the director. I think he should be directing films because he is so smart and so knowledgeable.
He really is.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah.
He was in a movie that I really liked. This is going back about 30 years ago, called The Boost, where he played a tax shelter salesman who started to get involved in cocaine, and the economic downturn or the change in the law made him a full-blown cokehead. That was with Sean Young. I thought he was magnificent in that. I really did.
Yeah. I think he's been good in everything he's done. I mean, he's worked for Oliver Stone. He did a picture about Nixon where Jimmy played Haldeman.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and he's played a heavy, he's played a hero, he's played. He's so diverse. I mean, he can play almost anything, and but he's he's never been like what you would call a major movie star. But on the other hand, his body of work is terrific, and he's been in so many films. And he actually had what was a very good television series where he played the shark. He played a lawyer.
Yes.
I don't know. He did that for CBS. It wasn't his favorite kind of work to do. Television is so different than making movies. But no, he just is good at everything he does. Unfortunately, he'd rather play poker than act. And I don't think we've seen enough of him. I think he should have done even more. But he lives in Rhode Island, and he's probably comfortable there. And I think he's just one of the great filmmakers. I call him a filmmaker, even though he's just been acting. But he's directed commercials and things. And I would love to see him be directing films, because I think that'd be terrific.
Well, I mean, keep encouraging him. I mean, I would love to see the same thing. And are you any projects right now in the works that you're working on, Jim?
Yeah, I just finished the screenplay actually, which I'm really enthused about, and we'll see if we can get that off the ground. That's the most difficult thing, is to try to get pictures made. There's a picture that's going into production called Alex, A-L-E-X, which is going to probably maybe until it gets organized and everything like that. I would imagine it starts filming maybe after the first of the year coming up.
Wow, can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm going to be the executive producer on that. And I've got several screenplays that I'm actually spending my time writing screenplays now, because you can work at your own leisure, you can work at your own time frame. You can work wherever you want, so you don't have to be in any particular place.
Any one particular place, yes.
Yeah, and I'm doing it really for myself, so I don't have any deadlines or anything where I have to turn in pages. And the only trouble is that nowadays it's very difficult to get the financing, because the theaters really are supported mostly by very young people, and they kind of like all of the superheroes and the bigger than life kind of movies, which is not my style. I like good acting films, good stories. Maybe one is called old-fashioned, but there's still an audience out there, and most of them really support cables and Netflix and Hulu and Showtime, and they're marvelous places to exhibit your film. And the subjects are interesting, more interesting than a lot of the features that are made for the theaters.
I would agree. I certainly would agree. And in our closing moments together, is there shall I say, of all the movies you've ever run into and all the scripts you've ever run into, I was asking the same question to Michael, which he was so kind to answer, where you said, if I really had that, I would have done I would have done a whole lot better by doing A, B, or C. Is there something like that every once in a while you think about, shoulda, coulda, woulda?
I don't like to look back.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look forward.
It's serving you well, my friend.
I don't think too much about I should have done. I said earlier in our discussion that I probably should have done In the Heat of the Night. I should have done Downhill Racers with Robert Redford. I should have done things. Are you still there?
No, I'm still here.
Yeah, I worry about it on the cell phone. You get cut off.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway. So I don't know, and it's just like when you ask about my favorite musicians and everything, it's like favorite movies, there's so many of them, it's according to what mood you're in. Sometimes I like to look at really crazy movies that I could see over and over again. the highly dramatic ones. You know the story so well that you're only looking at them to analyze the acting or analyze the writing. But everybody says the same movies. Citizen Kane and the Bogart movies and things like that.
Oh, Casablanca, yeah.
Casablanca, yeah, they're always on. But one thing that I must say about Kubrick, though, when all the scholars and all of the critics and the educators and film buffs get together and they have these polls of the different categories of their favorite movies, the Kubrick movies are always up there 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
He would get more points if he got so many points for first, second, or third. He'd get more points than Huston or George Stevens or anybody. When you think of science fiction, you always think of 2001. You do. You think of comedies, you think of Dr. Strangelove. You think of war films, Paths of Glory. And then comes Lolita and Clockwork Orange. It goes on and on. The time that we met and got together, I knew that he had talent, but I would never suspect that he'd be the icon that he's become, and I'm so proud of him. And I'm so sorry that he had a short life, because at 70 he could have done at least 4 more films or something.
Yeah, and that's for certain. And my heart goes out to you and with you on that. Last thing I wanted to mention to you. Michael was telling me you are a big baseball guy now. Are you a New York guy, Dodgers, Giants, Yankees, or is there another team you like to follow?
Well, I have to say, it's sort of been a very difficult life experience, is that I've always supported and loved the Cincinnati Reds. Now, the reason that is I grew up back east. We were living in New Jersey at the time, and my brother, 3 years older, was a big New York Yankee fan. When your brother likes chocolate, you like vanilla. When he likes the Yankees, I have to like somebody in the National League. Now, in 1939, when I first got interested in baseball, the Cincinnati Reds were the best team in the National League.
Sure, Wade Hoyt.
Unfortunately, the Yankees beat them 4 straight in the World Series. But in 1940, the Cincinnati Reds won it all. They beat Detroit in 7 games in the World Series. That meant that I became a Cincinnati Reds fan. It's pretty bizarre living in New Jersey, but it's because of my brother that I had to have the rival team. And so now I was stuck with the Cincinnati Reds. I didn't hear from them again until 1961. So that's a long time to be rooting.
That's a long time, right? Because it wasn't like you could turn on MLB and watch any team you want.
That's right. Yeah. So for all those years, I'm rooting for a loser, and they had their, they got the Big Red Machine.
Yeah, I was going to say that was quite an equalizer.
Yeah. In 75 and 76, they were. I think it's one of the greatest teams ever.
For certain.
When you think of that lineup, with Pete Rose and Joe Morgan and Ken Griffey and George Forster and Tony Perez and Johnny Bench. My God, every one of them are all-stars. No wonder that it was the Big Red Machine.
Yeah, the pitching was...
Everything comes and goes. So anyway, that's the answer. A long-winded answer to your question is let's go Cincinnati. And I'm afraid it's going to be a long time before I hear from him again.
Yeah, well, at least you can watch him these days, Jim. It makes it a little better for you.
It's painful. Sometimes it's painful. But I love the game, and I appreciate all the teams, actually. The players are incredible.
They really are. They're just, they're part of that, whatever you want to call it. They're the esteemed 600 or so, and the rest of us get to watch. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, talking here with James B. Harris and producer, director, worked many years with Stanley Kubrick and is still in the business. Jim, I am so honored. It was such a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming on, and as things develop, we'll chat again, I'm sure.
I would look forward to it. It's great talking to you, Tony, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jim. Take care now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Time out for Kicks Newsreel. Watch this for form and skill. A perfect swan dive. What graceful action. Now, let's call him back. Say, young man, where do you get all that energy?
From Kicks. Every morning I eat a good breakfast with a bowl of Kicks. Kicks is real food for action. Kicks tastes well, too. Got a keen corn flavor I like. Gives me lots of energy, because Kicks is real energy food. 83% energy. Later, when I go swimming, Kicks energy stays with me. Helps me have fun all morning long.
Right, everyone loves Kicks Keen Corn flavor. Crispy corn puffs that stay crisp in milk. So remember, for lots of pep and energy, eat Kicks. Food for action.
Special thanks to James B. Harris, and just such a wonderful time. We also thank the Angels on the takeout, Jim Croce on the lead-in, and all of you guys on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, all the stations up and down the line. We just had a terrific time here today. We'll be back next week with yet another show. So this is Tony D'Angelo signing off on Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast, and we shared a wonderful experience today. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Have a great day, and God bless.